So right now I'm on my way to the most remote nature reserve in Iceland to photograph the country's first settler. This is the realm of the Arctic fox.
There is no permanent residence within the nature reserve. The Arctic foxes are basically here by themselves. They've been protected within the nature reserve since the 1990s and have roamed here freely. So some of them come up quite close to people, differently than you would see in other parts of Iceland where they're still actively hunted. But here, because they are protected, they behave a little bit differently.
So I've just been settling into the campsite and I've already spotted an Arctic fox here just cruising through the campsite. He's pretty funny looking because he still had half of his winter coat on. So as soon as we arrived, I already saw tracks of the Arctic fox just along the beach and on the shoreline, and other visitors have indicated that they have seen them in this area as well, closer to the ocean. I'm going to go and walk along the beach and hopefully I bump into them along the way. So I've just found some Arctic fox tracks along the shoreline here, and the nails pointing in this direction along the beach are quite sharp. I know that the foxes come along here just very recently, so if we keep walking along the shoreline, perhaps the fox is doing a loop and I might bump into him again. So the reason why we're seeing so much Arctic fox activity along the shoreline is because this is one of its main food sources. And the Arctic fox will walk up and down the shoreline foraging for food, looking for things like shells and birds that have washed up onto the shore, and they'll eat mussels and other things that they can find in the seaweed. I'm really interested in documenting them as they're, frantically digging into the ground and searching, and super excited when they find something to eat. The Arctic fox has been a favorite subject of mine for many years, primarily because of the eyes. There's this intensity in them in the way that they reflect the environment around them. And at the same time that they reflect this curiosity, they also show this certain awareness that they have, always looking around and always checking things out, and the way that they interpret the environment that they live in. I just got dropped off in this bay because I got information that there was a fox den somewhere in this valley. Just gonna unpack and set up a little bit. Because I'm not exactly sure where the den site is right now, I want to be able to observe them from a distance, and once we do know where they are, we can approach them at a safe distance and hopefully they can become comfortable with our presence and we can observe some amazing behavior of the Arctic fox in its early age. So after sitting around for a few hours and not seeing really any fox activity at all, I decided to take a walk along the hiking trail that's along the ledge here overlooking the shoreline to take some photographs and film a little bit of the mountains in the distance. And all of a sudden, two little Arctic fox pups popped out. And at first I wasn't sure exactly what to do, so I stood really still and observed them and slowly moved back to a distance where I was far enough away. A little while later, I actually noticed an adult fox come down through the valley and move onto the shoreline, onto the beach. And this is where we actually saw her link up with two more Arctic fox pups that were a little bit older than the ones that I saw earlier. And while down there, it seemed like she was actually showing them how to scavenge for food and scratch around through the things on the shoreline to get something to eat. After a while sitting there and observing them from a distance across the beach, she moved off and back up into the valley, and we haven't seen her since. So it's pretty funny that we've spent hours in this valley and haven't seen any fox activity until all of a sudden we saw foxes in kind of a shorter time span. And it's also interesting because there's a lot of tall grass here and flowers, so there could be foxes moving all around us and we might never see them. We actually took a little bit of a nap while we were sitting in the sun here, And they probably even passed by us while we were sleeping.
So Arctic foxes are opportunistic scavengers, so they are on the beach quite a bit, but they're also up along the cliffs, and that's where you have the birds right now, the seabirds nesting, a huge source of food for them, and that is why we have kind of a dense population of Arctic foxes here living quite close together, is because of the abundance of food at this time of year,
right?
Which is when they need the food the most, because they're raising their young.
Although my main mission on this trip to Hornstrandir is to photograph the Arctic fox, I'm taking the opportunity to come over to this region that's across the bay from the campsite to photograph the bird life. I've also heard that there is an Arctic fox that lives in this region, so if we're lucky, might bump into him as well. That's probably the fox that was following the hikers. Just wrapping up on a 6-day shoot here in Hornstrandir and waiting for the boat to arrive, I wanted to take a moment to thank Borea Adventures for making this expedition happen, and of course give a shout out to nature for being here, and for the foxes, for showing up every single day. Stay tuned for the next video, in which I'll give a detailed breakdown of all the gear that I brought with me here on this expedition. So thanks for watching, and see you next time.